January 17, 1942. North Africa, a thin fog blankets the airfield near Oran. Frost clings to the edges of the P-38 Lightning's twin booms. Engines hum, a low growl vibrating through the concrete tarmac. Pilots climb into cockpits, fingers tight on control sticks, hearts racing with fear and anticipation. Above them, dawn ignites the horizon. The P-38s taxi into formation, their unusual twin-boom silhouette cutting a striking figure. Across the Mediterranean, German pilots laugh. What are those flying sticks? They mock, underestimating the machine before it even leaves the ground. But beneath the mockery lies potential raw, untested, waiting for skilled hands and clever mechanics to unlock it. Today, the P-38s will climb into thin, cold air, where altitude and engineering will decide who survives. Above the clouds, fear meets innovation. The sky is about to prove them wrong. The P-38 Lightning was born from a blend of ambition and necessity. In 1937, the United States Army Air Corps sought a fighter unlike any other high-performance aircraft, capable of escorting bombers deep into enemy territory. Lockheed's engineers, led by Clarence Kelly Johnson, answered with a radical design, a central fuselage housing the pilot, armament, and equipment, flanked by twin booms that carried engines and tail surfaces. Twin Allison V1710 engines gave an unprecedented speed and range for the era. Its distinctive silhouette was unlike anything the world had seen, a combination of elegance and menace suspended in metal. By late 1941, P-38s began trickling into combat theaters, first in the Pacific and then North Africa. Pilots were immediately struck by its contrasts. On one hand, the Lightning could climb faster and fly higher than many contemporary fighters. On the other, it was temperamental at high altitudes, prone to engine failures if pushed too hard. Ground crews quickly became indispensable, adapting engines, installing and experimenting with oxygen systems to make the aircraft viable in the thin, frigid air above enemy lines. North Africa was a proving ground. The Luftwaffe dominated the skies over the Mediterranean, fielding Messerschmitt, Bf-109s, and Focke-Wulf, FW-190s, flown by seasoned pilots. German forces were confident. The P-38 was a curiosity rather than a threat. Its twin-boom design drew laughter among the enemy ranks. Two tails, one pilot. Some pilots mocked in reports. German reconnaissance photos labeled the aircraft as a peculiar American toy. Yet, beneath the mockery, there were subtle concerns. The P-38's speed and level flight, and its long-range capabilities, meant that it could reach formations and strike before German fighters could react. The first engagements were cautious. American squadrons, still learning the Lightning's strengths and weaknesses, flew limited escort missions. Fuel constraints, engine quirks, and pilot inexperience often blunted the P-38's potential. They saw an unusual silhouette, a rapid but fragile machine, and assumed it would crumble under sustained pressure. Behind the scenes, however, American mechanics were quietly reshaping what the Germans dismissed. Engineers studied altitude performance and discovered that adding turbochargers to the Allison engines could dramatically increase the P-38's effective ceiling. Fuel mixtures were adjusted for thin air, propeller pitch was refined, and engine cooling was optimized to prevent stalls. By mid-1942, the P-38 could climb higher than many of its opponents, and it could sustain speed and maneuverability where Luftwaffe fighters began to struggle. This preparation coincided with a broader shift in air strategy. Long-range bomber missions into Europe and North Africa required escorts that could maintain altitude over desert heat and mountain air. The Lightning's capacity for sustained high-altitudinal flight made it indispensable. Commanders recognized the potential, though pilots still approached each mission with caution. It was one thing to fly a fighter that could outrun enemy aircraft. It was another to survive the punishing environment, where engine failure meant instant death. Despite the early setbacks and mockery, the stage was set. The P-38's combination of speed, altitude, capability, and firepower was quietly reshaping aerial warfare. The Germans, unaware of the improvements American mechanics were implementing, continued to underestimate the Lightning. They mocked its shape, its unconventional design, and its perceived fragility. Yet each day in the North African skies brought lessons. American pilots adapted. Mechanics innovated, and slowly the P-38 was moving from curiosity to weapon, a machine that, in the hands of trained pilots and with the support of ingenious engineers, would turn mockery into fear. By the end of 1942, the first seeds of a turning point were planted. The Germans still laughed at the strange silhouette cutting across the sky, but the laughter would not last. Above the Mediterranean and the deserts of North Africa, the P-38 was learning to dominate the era, testament to human ingenuity, mechanical precision, and the relentless drive to turn vulnerability into advantage. The stage was ready for the next chapter. The Americans would not just survive, they would begin to dictate the terms of aerial combat. Were quietly redefining what the Lightning could achieve. The early combat reports from North Africa were clear. The P-38 could climb faster and fly higher than many Axis fighters, but only if its engines survived the thin, frigid air above 20,000 feet. Without intervention, pilots faced engine stalls, supercharger failures, and rapidly falling performance. Each mission highlighted a simple truth: the machine's potential could only be unlocked by meticulous maintenance and creative engineering. Turbochargers were recalibrated to deliver consistent power at extreme altitudes, while radiators and coolant systems were reinforced to prevent overheating during extended climbs. Propeller blades were fine-tuned for maximum lift and thrust at high speeds, where engine failure was more than an inconvenience, was fatal. The P-38 could now operate at altitudes previously considered dangerous for twin-engine fighters. Missions that once required tight formation flying to conserve fuel became flexible. Pilots could climb above enemy formations, use altitude to their advantage, and strike before the Luftwaffe could react. Hermann pilots, who had once mocked the Lightning as a slow, awkward oddity, began to encounter an entirely different reality. These technological gains were matched by strategic adjustments. American commanders refined aerial tactics around the P-38's strengths. Escort missions were planned with altitude advantages in mind, allowing Lightnings to intercept enemy aircraft from above, dive with lethal speed, and retreat to high-altitude positions before sustaining return fire. Reconnaissance flights revealed that German pilots were increasingly wary. The combination of mechanical innovation and tactical evolution transformed the P-38 from an experimental design into a formidable weapon. It was a tool that could shape the outcome of an engagement. Each sortie reinforced the lesson that engineering and human ingenuity could turn early vulnerabilities into decisive advantages. German pilots began encountering Lightnings at altitudes they could not comfortably reach, engaging in combat scenarios they were unprepared for. The aircraft that had once drawn laughter was now a serious threat, its very shape becoming a symbol of unexpected power. In these skies, mechanics, engineers, and commanders had turned potential into performance, not just as a fighter, but as a game-changer in the air war. From here, the story expands into multiple perspectives: the pilots, the mechanics, the leadership decisions, and the enemy reactions, all converging to show how this underestimated aircraft would dominate the skies. Human angle. The pilot's perspective. For the pilots, the P-38 was a paradox. On T-ground, it looked almost comical to booms, flanking a central cockpit, like a flying insect. But once airborne, it became an extension of their own reflexes and instincts. Early missions over North Africa were a test of courage. Frostbitten hands gripped the control stick as the twin Allison engines screamed, climbing past 20,000 feet where the air was thin and biting. Every climb, every dive, required precision. One miscalculation, one moment of hesitation, and the aircraft could stall or lose power. Fear was constant. Pilots knew that Germans mocked the design, believing it fragile. But the first real dogfights shattered that assumption. The P-38 could climb above the enemy, dive with tremendous speed, and fire its 450 caliber machine guns and a single 20mm cannon with terrifying accuracy. Confidence built slowly. Every successful sortie reinforced the idea that the Lightning was not just survivable, it could dominate. Human skill and mechanical reliability were inseparable. Pilots who learned to trust their aircraft thrived, while those who doubted faced grim consequences. Tactical angle. Exploiting the skies from a tactical standpoint, the P-38 forced a re-evaluation of air combat. Traditional dogfighting emphasized horizontal maneuvers at medium altitudes. The Lightning introduced a vertical dimension. Its turbocharged engines allowed pilots to climb above formations of Bf-109s or FW-190s, striking from unexpected angles. Divan-zoom attacks became standard: climb above, dive at speed, fire, then return to altitude before the enemy could respond. Escort missions also benefited. Long-range bombers over Europe and North Africa required protection at altitudes where German fighters struggled. The P-38 could maintain formation at high ceilings, intercepting enemy aircraft before they could reach the bombers. This changed the balance of power in the air, turning the Lightning into both predator and protector. Tactics that once relied on mass and numbers could now rely on altitude and speed, exploiting mechanical advantages to compensate for numerical inferiority. Technological angle, engineering altitude advantage. At the heart of the Lightning's success was innovation. The twin Allison V1710 engines, paired with turbochargers, allowed sustained power in the thin atmosphere above 25,000 feet. Early limitations: engine stalls, overheating, propeller inefficiency were overcome by methodical experimentation. Mechanics refined turbocharger settings, optimized fuel mixtures, and strengthened cooling systems. Even small improvements, like adjusting propeller pitch or reinforcing control surfaces, made the difference between survival and disaster at high altitudes. The P-38's design also influenced combat outcomes. Twin engines provided redundancy: if one failed, the other could keep the aircraft aloft. Centralized armament in the nose eliminated the need for convergence adjustments, allowing pilots to fire accurately at longer ranges. This combination of speed, altitude, and firepower was unparalleled at the time, making the Lightning an aircraft that rewarded both skill and ingenuity. Together, these angles illustrate a transformation. The pilot's fear was tempered by confidence. Tactical doctrine evolves to exploit altitude and speed. Engineering innovations turned vulnerability into advantage. The P-38, once dismissed as strange and fragile, was becoming a weapon that demanded respect. But the story did not end here. While human skill, tactical thinking, and technological prowess shaped the P-38's early successes, leadership decisions, enemy adaptation, and psychological factors were equally critical in determining whether the Lightning would remain underestimated or become feared. The success of the P-38 was not just a triumph of machines and pilots, it was shaped by leadership at every level. Squadron commanders recognized early that the Lightning's strengths required new strategies. High-altitude interception became a cornerstone of American air doctrine, and mission planning was meticulously adjusted to exploit the aircraft's unique capabilities. Commanders encouraged pilots to climb above enemy formations, forcing Luftwaffe fighters into reactive positions, and coordinated bomber escorts that leveraged the Lightning's range and firepower. The leadership challenge extended beyond strategy. Trust had to be built between pilots and mechanics, between ground crews and aviators. Orders emphasized maintenance discipline as much as combat skill. A single mismanaged turbocharger or a neglected engine could be fatal. Leaders ensured that innovations tested in the field were implemented quickly, creating a culture where adaptation was expected and rewarded. In this environment, pilots felt confident taking risks, knowing their machines and the engineers who maintained them would perform under pressure. Across the sky, German pilots were forced to reconsider their assumptions. The P-38's twin-boom silhouette, once the subject of ridicule, became a figure of unease. Early encounters over North Africa, and later over the Mediterranean, demonstrated the aircraft's altitude superiority and concentrated firepower. Luftwaffe reports began noting the difficulty of engaging Lightnings at extreme altitudes, and the element of surprise often favored American pilots. Tactical adjustments were attempted. Bf-109s would climb aggressively to engage P-38. Formations would tighten, and pilots sought to exploit perceived weaknesses in the Lightning's handling. Yet these countermeasures were only partially effective. The combination of altitude, speed, and mechanical reliability allowed Lightnings to dictate the terms of engagement. The mockery that had greeted the P-38's arrival slowly gave way to a grudging respect eventually. Genuine fear. German pilots began to report the aircraft as formidable in their after-action notes, a stark reversal from earlier disdain. Fear, confidence, and innovation at the heart of every engagement lay a human truth. The mind shapes the battlefield as much as the body or the machine. American pilots initially confronted the P-38's quirks with anxiety. The twin engines, high-altitude performance, and unusual handling demanded constant attention. Each mission was a test of nerve and skill. Yet as mechanics improved reliability and leadership reinforced tactical doctrine, confidence grew. Fear did not vanish, it transformed. Pilots learned to respect the aircraft, to push it to its limits without courting disaster. On the other side, airman pilots' morale was affected by the Lightning's newfound effectiveness. Machines they had once mocked now forced them to react defensively, altering their tactics and eroding confidence. Psychological pressure became a factor in combat. An enemy that strikes from above, with speed and precision, can destabilize even experienced airmen. The P-38's reputation began to influence not just outcomes, but decisions: when to engage, when to retreat, and how to plan future missions. Viewed together, these perspectives reveal a dynamic interplay: human skill, technological innovation, leadership decisions, and enemy perception all shaped the P-38's emergence as a dominant fighter. Confidence built in pilots reinforced tactical doctrine, which leveraged mechanical improvements, which in turn forced enemies to adapt. Every mission became a lesson in adaptation, every encounter a test of skill and innovation. By the end of these angles, it was clear: the P-38 had evolved beyond its initial underestimation. The aircraft that Germans once laughed at had become a serious threat, a machine capable of rewriting air combat expectations. Spring 1943. The skies over Tunisia are cold and thin, a brittle blue stretching from horizon to horizon. American P-38 squadrons prepare for a mission unlike any before: a high-altitude interception of a Luftwaffe formation targeting advancing Allied ground forces. Frost clings to the edges of wings, and engines hum with precise tension. Turbochargers worry to life. Pilots double-check gauges, oxygen masks, and radios. Every detail matters. In the rarefied air above 25,000 feet, a small miscalculation can be fatal. The German formation appears first as dots against the sky: Bf-109s and FW-190s escorting transports. At first glance, the Luftwaffe seems confident. They see the P-38s climbing in formation below them, their twin-boom silhouette almost comical from afar. But these pilots have learned from previous sorties. The Lightnings climb relentlessly, engines tuned to maintain power. Where German aircraft falter, within minutes, the altitude advantage becomes evident. The American fighters are above the enemy, poised to dive with lethal precision. Lieutenant Richard Dick Bong, a future ace, recalls the feeling. You could see them, but they couldn't see you yet. You had the drop, and it was yours to use. The P-38's dive, speed building to nearly 400 miles per hour, their nose-mounted guns cutting a deadly line through the formation. The Bf-109s attempt evasive maneuvers, but the Lightning's concentrated firepower and twin engines leave few escape options. One by one, enemy aircraft are damaged or destroyed, smoke trailing from engines as pilots struggle to maintain control. Mechanics improvements are decisive. Turbochargers maintain optimal performance despite the altitude. Fuel mixtures prevent stalling, and reinforced cooling systems keep engines from overheating during repeated high-speed dives. What once might have been fatal engine failures are now mere technical detail-solved problems, allowing pilots to focus entirely on the fight. Formation flying, refined under leadership guidance, ensures mutual support. No P-38 is left isolated. The squadron operates as a single, coordinated weapon. Amid the chaos, communication is constant, but minimal. Pilots call positions and threats over radio, executing maneuvers practiced countless times in training. Trust in the machine and in each other allows split-second decisions. Dive, fire, climb, regroup, a rhythmic dance of violence and precision. The German formation, once confident, begins to fracture under sustained pressure. Pilots note the unusual stability of the Lightnings in dives and the relentless pressure from above. Mockery has turned to apprehension. By the end of the engagement, the result is clear. Allied forces have lost no bombers to the intercepting Luftwaffe, while the German squadron suffers significant losses. Reports sent to command highlight the P-38's performance: unprecedented altitude capability, deadly firepower, and coordinated tactics that exploit every mechanical and human advantage. For American pilots, this mission confirms what mechanics and commanders had known for months: the Lightning is more than a machine. It is a force multiplier. Yet this is only the beginning. While today's engagement demonstrates the potential of altitude and innovation, subsequent sorties will push the aircraft, the pilots, and the mechanics to their limits. The Germans will adapt, the stakes will rise, and the true test of the P-38's dominance is only just beginning. Late spring 1943, Allied forces are pressing deeper into Tunisia, and the air above is a theater of escalating tension. P-38 squadrons, now seasoned by months of missions, climb in tight formation, turbochargers humming at maximum efficiency. Frost and thin air still bite at 25,000 feet, but pilots are calm, their focus absolute. Ground crews have fine-tuned engines, ensuring that every Lightning is capable of sustained high-altitude performance. Today's objective: intercept a large Luftwaffe supply convoy escorted by experienced Bf-109s. As the German formation comes into view, the scene is almost surreal. Twin-boom silhouettes slice through the sky, moving with the precision of a clockwork weapon. The Luftwaffe, initially dismissive of the Lightning, now hesitates. Reports from previous missions have spread. American Lightnings climb higher, dive faster, and fire with unprecedented accuracy. Pilots recognize the danger, but are trapped in a sky that no longer favors them. The P-38s execute a textbook climb-and-dive maneuver. From above, they strike with devastating effect. Nose-mounted guns unleash a concentrated barrage, taking out the lead escort and disrupting enemy coordination. German pilots attempt to regroup, but the altitude advantage gives American pilots the freedom to retreat and reposition. The twin engines of the Lightning absorb damage without loss of control, allowing daring maneuvers that would have grounded lesser aircraft. Among the pilots, aces distinguish themselves. Colonel John "Johnny" Deschamps notes in his mission report, "For the first time, we felt completely in control of the air. The Lightning's speed and altitude gave us the initiative, and we used it relentlessly." Every successful engagement reinforces the aircraft's reputation. Luftwaffe pilots report unusual stability, aggressive climbing ability, and concentrated firepower. The aircraft that had been mocked now inspires caution, and in some cases, fear. This series of sorties over North Africa, and later in the Mediterranean, establishes a pattern. The P-38 is no longer just a high-altitude fighter. It is a psychological weapon. Enemy morale begins to waver. Experienced German pilots report frustration and anxiety as Lightnings intercept missions with alarming efficiency. Tactical manuals are revised, but the adjustments are reactive, never proactive. The Lightning has rewritten the rules of engagement, forcing the Luftwaffe to contend with a threat they initially underestimated. The turning point is evident, not just in numbers, but in perception. Allied pilots are emboldened, their confidence growing with each mission. Mechanics' ingenuity and careful planning ensure the aircraft performs beyond expectations. Commanders see strategic advantages: long-range missions, high-altitude interceptions, and the ability to strike deep behind enemy lines. The P-38 has moved from experimental fighter to game-changing weapon. By early summer, the results are undeniable. Luftwaffe formations are more cautious, American bombing missions face fewer threats, and the P-38 has earned the grudging respect of friend and foe alike. The combination of pilot skill, mechanical innovation, and tactical leadership has turned mockery into dominance. The once dismissed twin-boom silhouette now casts a shadow over the skies of North Africa, a warning and a promise. The Lightning has arrived, and it will not be ignored. By mid-1943, the P-38 Lightning had established itself as more than an experimental fighter. It was a decisive factor in the air war over North Africa. The missions of spring and early summer demonstrated the aircraft's unique combination of speed, altitude capability, and firepower. Allied air forces reported markedly improved escort effectiveness for bombers and a significant reduction in losses during critical supply runs. Pilots who had once approached the Lightning with trepidation now flew with confidence, exploiting the aircraft's altitude advantage to strike first and retreat unscathed. German losses reflect the shift. Luftwaffe after-action reports document significant attrition among veteran pilots, particularly in the Bf-109 and Fw-190 units operating over Tunisian airspace. One report notes that sustained engagements with Heel-Tatud P-38 squadrons caused both tactical confusion and morale degradation. German commanders increasingly had to alter patrol routines, avoid predictable airspace, and assign additional resources to counter the Lightning's reach. What had once been a curiosity now demanded focused attention, strategic planning, and caution. The P-38's operational impact extended beyond aerial victories. Allied ground forces benefited from more reliable air cover. Long-range reconnaissance missions, previously risky due to altitude limitations, could now proceed with escort, providing commanders with accurate intelligence on German troop movements. Bombing missions over key logistical hubs saw increased effectiveness, as P-38s intercepted enemy interceptors before they could reach the bombers. The synergy of technology, training, and tactical doctrine created a multiplier effect. The Lightning did not merely survive engagements, it reshaped them. Mechanics' contributions were equally critical in this period. Reports from squadron maintenance officers detail how turbocharger adjustments, fuel optimization, and cooling system improvements directly correlated with mission success rates. Aircraft availability remained high despite the operational tempo, demonstrating that human ingenuity on the ground was as decisive as skill in the air. In effect, the P-38 was a collaborative victory. Pilots, mechanics, and commanders had together converted a mock design into a weapon capable of dominating the skies. Even as the Allies celebrated, the psychological effect on German forces became evident. Pilots wrote of anxiety when encountering Lightnings at altitudes that previously guaranteed safety. Commanders noted that engagements had shifted from confident interception to cautious observation. The mockery of months prior had disappeared. In its place was respect tinged with fear. The P-38 had proven that technological innovation, when paired with disciplined execution, could rapidly overturn assumptions and force a reconsideration of strategy. This immediate aftermath set the tone for the wider air campaign in the Mediterranean. The P-38's ability to control high-altitude space allowed the Allies to plan deeper missions. Confident that intercepting fighters could be neutralized or out, air superiority in key regions directly facilitated the ongoing ground campaign, providing a crucial advantage in the race to secure North Africa. Yet, the story was far from over. The Germans would continue to adapt. Pilots would continue to push limits, and mechanics would be called on to maintain peak performance under increasingly stressful conditions. The Lightning's victories were hard-won, but they foreshadowed an enduring shift. An aircraft once mocked could, through human skill and mechanical ingenuity, become a force that demanded acknowledgement from friend and foe alike. As the North African campaign drew to a close in mid-1943, the P-38 Lightning had firmly established itself as a cornerstone of Allied air strategy. The aircraft's influence extended beyond tactical victories. It became a strategic asset, enabling missions previously deemed too risky due to Luftwaffe interception. The psychological impact on both sides was profound. American pilots now flew with a sense of assurance that the P-38 could survive engagements that might have been fatal in other aircraft, and coordinated with ground and naval forces to maximize the aircraft's effectiveness. Ground crews, mechanics, and commanders recognized that their painstaking work directly contributed to this newfound dominance. Luftwaffe reports from late 1943 detail evasive tactics, increased altitude patrols, and revised engagement protocols designed to counter the Lightning's advantages. Veteran pilots expressed unease when encountering P-38 formations at high altitude, climb beyond reach, and absorb damage without losing maneuverability. The Lightning had shifted not only the balance of air power but also the psychological calculus of engagement. Fear replaced overconfidence. Strategically, the P-38's success influenced broader Allied operations. Its long-range escort capability allowed bomber missions over Axis-controlled territories to proceed with reduced losses, directly affecting the disruption of enemy supply lines and the weakening of German positions in southern Europe. The aircraft's performance in the Mediterranean and North African theaters set a precedent for its later deployment in the Pacific. In every theater, the Lightning proved adaptable, reliable, and strategically consequential. The Lightning's story also highlighted the importance of interdisciplinary coordination. Pilots relied on mechanics relied on leadership guidance, and commanders relied on both. This collaboration exemplified a broader principle. Technological advantage alone was insufficient. The P-38 became a symbol of this principle, a testament to how ingenuity, courage, and precision could transform an underappreciated tool into a weapon of decisive consequence. By the end of 1943, the P-38 had achieved more than aerial victories. It had reshaped expectations. The mockery that greeted the P-38's arrival in North Africa had long vanished, replaced by a grudging acknowledgement of its lethal potential. Its legacy was not only in the aircraft itself, but in the lessons it offered about adaptability, courage, and the transformative power of turning fear into mastery. The story of the P-38 Lightning is a testament to ingenuity under pressure. An aircraft that first drew laughter in the skies above North Africa became, through human skill and mechanical innovation, a machine that commanded respect. Its twin booms, once written, came to symbolize more than unusual. They represented the capacity to turn perceived weakness into decisive strength. The transformation was not merely mechanical. It was human. Pilots learned to trust their aircraft, pushing it to altitudes that would have been dangerous only months earlier. Mechanics labored tirelessly, adjusting turbochargers, fine-tuning engines, and testing every system to its limit. Commanders adapted tactics, using height and speed to create advantages that no number of enemy planes could fully counter. Each success was a collaboration, an orchestration of minds and hands working together to master a once uncertain tool. There is a quiet lesson in the P-38's story. Innovation alone is insufficient. It requires courage, discipline, and vision to realize its potential. The Germans' early mockery reminds us how easy it is to misjudge what is unfamiliar, how initial impressions can blind even experienced forces to latent power. Yet through persistence and adaptation, the Americans turned skepticism into advantage, and fear, whether their own or that of their enemies, became altitude, speed, and precision. In the broader arc of World War II, the P-38 did more than win engagements. It reshaped air strategy, bolstered morale, and demonstrated the interplay between technology and human agency. Above all, it reminds us that mastery is rarely granted. It is earned through meticulous work, bold decisions, and the willingness to embrace the unfamiliar, from mockery in the skies to mastery at altitude. The Lightning's ascent is a story of transformation. It is a story of courage meeting ingenuity, of fear giving way to control, and of a machine, the people who commanded it, altering the course of history. In the thin, cold air above North Africa, a once mocked aircraft became a symbol of human resolve, proving that even the most underestimated force can rise to dominate when innovation and perseverance converge.